Imagine a world where time would drift slowly. A world where music carries you away. Experience goth moods. A soundtrack for those who go against the
Love was
grain.
just a glance away, a warm embracing dance
Remember
away.
the heartbreak with Purnamaz.
Too dumb to realize that I
Feel like a rock star with the Smash Mouth.
To the road, to hit the ground running. Don't make sense, but not for the fun. Just get on the
Unlock
journey,
your gothic bad boy with Britney Spears. Rock out with Smooth Santa.
You got the kind of loving that can be so smooth that
No other collection gives you the feeling of goth moods. Hailing from the faraway land of Australia, former chef, talented musician, and officially diagnosed with autism, please welcome.
Bad Phantom.
Oh, well, I thought it was really interesting to have you reach out. I think it was right after the New Year stream, right? You'd emailed me.
Yeah, because I was in the chat at the time. I think I messaged about 3 times. And you saw the third one. The third one was in all caps, so I'm glad you saw that one.
Yeah. Got me interested as soon as you had said that you had gotten an adult diagnosis of.
Yes.
And did they just flat out say you have autism, or did they say something like you're on the spectrum? How did they go about that?
Through basically, so referral to a psych, and you just talk about your experience. And I mean, I had to go in there with, I guess, a diagnosis in mind, but kind of like laying everything on the table and just saying, what do you think? So talking about symptoms, my way of thinking, all this kind of stuff. And the determination was autism spectrum disorder with, ADHD and OCD tendencies. OCD in particular would be just a behavioral analysis of like stuff that manifests through autism, and ADHD, in addition to autism, is just like a slightly different way of thinking or understanding things or reacting, really.
Was anything coming to a head? Because sometimes people, they go and see a psychiatrist because they're really suffering or things aren't as they should be and they need help. Was it more of just a matter of curiosity for you, or were you trying to get some guidance on how to live around that time?
I was a chef probably just before COVID hit. So I'm talking, when did I leave? So I'm going to say February 2020 is when I left this job. And before that, I was a chef for 5 years. So we're talking like upwards of 70, 80 hours a week. And now reflecting on that as someone who has had autism my whole life, that was only able to happen because of masking. It's essentially adhering to what is socially acceptable. You know someone in high school and they're a bright personality. They might be into anime and they're very happy about it and they don't give a fuck what anyone thinks. But as soon as they turn 18, they're told, all right, now it's time to do adult shit. And they sweep that under the rug and they put on a face, they go to work, and it kills them inside. A lot of people just aren't fit for work because they don't want to and they're not built for it.
Yeah.
In an effect, like that's what happened to me from like 19, specifically when I moved out. I put on a face and I went to work and did the thing, and I was like, why am I so exhausted by this? And then I went and challenged myself more with being a chef, and I quit my job because I had a complete mental breakdown. I basically was exhausted. I could not take the stress anymore. And from that is like where I went to therapy about it. And it was unpacking everything that I realized like led to the diagnosis. I think universally almost the Asperger's term is a bit outdated. The whole perspective kind of comes from that autistic people just are on a spectrum regardless, and say like even terminology such as like high functioning is, I guess, not trying to be phased out, but it's trying to be like less of a descriptor. Inherently, like autism is a social disorder. So just say Josh is, this side of the spectrum, and say like I would probably be on the closer side. It's down to how much, not pressure, but how much influence they've had with being told to talk to other people or learn, how to speak.
It's interesting with classifying it because, like you said, high functioning autism, that I feel like was done away with quite some time ago. That was considered old fashioned, I think even up to 10 years ago. Asperger's, I did not know that they were getting away from that as well, because that used to be all over the place.
I mean, Asperger's is essentially like the scientific term, or what they'll label you, as opposed to saying high functioning.
Yeah.
By social standards, right? A lot of people would say I was high functioning, but I feel like if anything, that does a disservice to all the times I do not function well. This is coming from someone who had a complete mental break due to like anxiety and overwhelm and everything, and I was not functioning well at all. And just because I can have a conversation with you does not mean I'm high functioning. Cobras fans, they would have a hard time even calling Josh high functioning, and that's based on, certain things he does or does not do.
After I dropped it again.
I think I was thinking about the perspective of someone with autism, and I can't remember if it was clarified, but I think your other guest was still kind of speaking from the outside a little bit. I think it's absolutely okay to laugh at him. That's kind of the perspective I'm coming from, but as long as people have understanding of where the behavior comes from, like, because I feel like people tend to dismiss all of his behavior when some of it still needs to have focus. I guess that's something I want to explore with like the thin line between tragedy and comedy, almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
His usage of words like Valentine's and just, the spelling and stuff. And obviously that can be intrinsic with autism, like dyslexia associated with that. And it's not something to be made fun of, but I mean, in the right context, it is definitely funny. So, I mean, I wouldn't point and laugh at someone and say, you can't spell properly. But when Josh says, I'd rather be a simp than an incel, it's hilarious. It's objectively funny.
It's really interesting that you yourself being on the spectrum, and a lot of people will come in and say, God, what is wrong with you? You're making fun of an autistic person. The knee-jerk reaction is, you're making fun of him. And my answer is, his foibles, his filter that all his information goes through, just the things he says as a person, he's really, really funny. Even Clint said it. Clint has said, and when he talked to the subreddit, that Josh can be incredibly funny whether he means to or not. And that's coming from his dad. I think that says a lot.
Incredibly unique. If I had to sum up Josh, it would be that he was the ultimate anti-hero in terms of the affection that you can have for him, but also the simultaneous hatred is just palpable.
Yeah.
Like I can sit down and watch him talk, endlessly about transphobic shit and how he is, he loves women or he's a feminist, but he'll drag Stephanie through the mud. I can listen to that kind of stuff, but I wish no harm on him.
No.
And I want him to do the best he can. And I think this is, what comes down to the dichotomy of tragedy and comedy, or at least the thin line between them, is that, I mean, in the face of something tragic, like I think most people want the best for him, but in the face of tragedy, in terms of him not helping himself or even bad things happening to him, like the only way to really react sometimes is to laugh at it. And I think that's kind of where I find the expression. Obviously, like in a way of normalizing, an autistic experience is to just say an autistic person has as much choice as a neurotypical person, but they might just come from it in a different perspective. People would call me an arsehole in high school because I was very blunt and, I was very, very stern, but I was also very funny. But then I realized, with the scope I have now, that me being an arsehole was not supposed to be funny. That was me just telling someone to fuck off. That is funny to some people, and
the honesty, and people admire that too.
Honesty,
Those who don't have the filter, they don't mess around, they just tell you point blank. It is entertaining. Sometimes it just requires the right person, the right delivery, and it sounds like you had the stuff, the charisma.
That's exactly it. So I guess the way you would maybe put me and Josh into a similar pool would be, from the high functioning label. Obviously, I don't want to really push that, but I mean, people look at this only from social acceptance perspective. So a person like Josh can maybe metabolize into a reasonable society better than someone who is selectively a mute person, right? But that's because they can just have a conversation. Me watching movies as a kid, obsessively, like on loop, or watching a lot of British comedy. That's where I got my humor from, and that's where I learned to speak. Because on a social level, that's what I understood. In an effect, that's what made me friends, and that was the only way I could fit in. To some respect, that's exactly the way that Josh has gone. But I feel like a lot of that hasn't been nurtured in the right way. He can speak to a reasonably fluent level, but has not taken the time to ever read a book.
No.
And that's something that I think, comes from, I wouldn't say pressure, but kind of a motivation, overcoming an anxiety or overcoming some sort of disadvantage or perceived disadvantage. The determination I came to for a lot of Josh's behavior was intrinsic to, I think, like Clint's lack of, I guess, effort in that respect. He shouldn't really be living alone. That's Clint putting him in a little box and then kind of living his own life and only intervening when he needs to or connecting when he needs to. And a lot could be fixed with that intervention. Even like Clint doing wands with him at the moment is a positive thing.
Oh yeah.
But you can't just make wands for him and then leave. You need to make wands with him and communicate with him and talk to him and teach him about morality and values and what's right and wrong. I think you guys spoke about autism and identity to some respect in the last podcast. I've always had an opinion of Josh that a lot of his identity, I guess, attributing the whole like patriotism, America, the weeping over 9/11 stuff is rooted in this sense of what he thinks like a strong guy should be. Really beefy, muscular U.S. guys who like, yeah, Trump and all America. Like he sees a lot of strength with that person or that character. You know, it's manly to drink a lot of beer, or it's manly to drink Jack Daniels from the bottle.
Yeah.
I don't think he likes booze. I think at some level, his alcoholism is almost an effect of him trying to appear as manly and as alpha as he can. And that's kind of just derailed into an actual dependency. Minute and a half, I think, vodka in his mouth.
Yes.
He doesn't
Keeping
he
it in
doesn't
when he
enjoy
played.
it.
Yeah, no, he doesn't like it.
Yeah, I don't think he actually likes hot chili or like spicy things,
Yeah.
but he continuously puts it in there because I think he sees the epic meal times or shows that have kind of sprung off that where it's like bacon and grease and cheese is like manly and powerful and strong and it's very primal. And I think that kind of runs on with his alcohol use and the excessive food combination, whatever you want to call it, the grease, the bacon. It's like, that's what he thinks makes him appear strong and manly.
Yeah. He is very
And I
obsessed
think
with
that-
masculinity, which could be its own episode.
Yeah.
Wanting to look strong, just like you said. Having that appearance is very important to him. Yeah.
This comes from like what he understands about homosexuality as well. Warlord almost innocently, I wouldn't say innocently, takes off his shirt in stream and maybe puts a new shirt on or does something. And Josh averts his eyes like it's poison. This sense of like what he has been taught as what is masculine. So he tries to adhere to that.
No
You know,
dicks in his pornography. He can't look at another man's penis. No, sir.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why I find those weird, I guess, jump arounds with his like value system where he goes, oh, you know, trans rights is really important and then says some transphobic stuff because that's what he's seen other guys do. You know, I support women and feminism, but women and misogynist statement one after the other. That's an effect of this inner battle, this turmoil he has with holding up his own moral standards and then what he believes people will accept him for,
Yes.
which is inherently an autistic trait. The of age thing.
Oh, the what prefix, if you want to call it that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I don't know how I would explain this, but most autistic people, because they're living from a point of only understanding the world from their perspective, so morality and like views and what is right and wrong to them is very, very strong, and it's asserted very strongly. But also the counteracting of that good morality is also bad morality. I think Josh, at a very base level, along with a lot of other autistic people, you know, have the fear that they're a bad person or have the fear that they'll become the thing that they hate the most. I feel like to some level, that is where that language with Josh comes from. It's insistence that he's only interested in of-age women.
Yeah.
And a lot of people might use that as like a red flag or a signal to something else, but I think a lot of his expression, has been misinterpreted because of that fact. Like he's talking about gender equality because he just wants everyone to be harmonious and wants everyone to be happy. Ultimately, he just wants, I guess, love and happiness in his life. But then obviously through that comes anger, which is, you know, him being angry at women, all that kind of stuff. You know, the of age thing is a specific assertion that I think that's fucked up. That's horrible. I want everyone to know. And I think that is all it is. It becomes obsessive and it becomes looped. It becomes a part of literally his everyday vocabulary. Yeah, even in his like anger towards Stephanie recently, and was it his boasting of I've had sex with 4 times more hotter and more of age girls since you or something.
Yeah.
No, that's the truth of it. I fucked chicks that were 4 times hotter and of age and what have you. You know what I'm saying? Stephanie was of age when I went with her, but that's beside the point.
It's an insistence, and it's like an assertion that he continuously has to make, because I believe that is really what he's most afraid of. Being seen as a pedophile, becoming a pedophile, or I guess being a bad person inherently. I don't want to sit on the pedophile thing too much.
The closest thing I can think of is if you ever see news anchors just start saying like penis or like fuck or random curse words, it's because internally they're thinking, don't say that word, don't say that word, don't say that word.
Exactly.
And it comes out. You wonder, like, how can you do that? But it's because their brain is perpetually reminding them to not do it. And I think that makes a lot of sense with Josh.
This is where I think he's kind of, I guess, stuck in a rut. His want for a girlfriend, but he doesn't have a girlfriend, doesn't put the effort into getting a girlfriend, but it's the world's fault. But at the end of it, it's because Josh is a bad person and it's his fault, and it loops like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's never ending.
It comes out rarely when he criticizes himself. It's been talked about before, but when Sean starts really digging into Josh, it's because he has that outlet. But he never dogs on himself the same way like he does when he's speaking through Sean.
I don't care. Quit smoking. Stop smoking stuff. Bullshit. It's like you cheated on Stephanie. Okay, we'll just drop it. No, we're not going to drop it. You are an asshole. Asshole, asshole, asshole. Nerd.
I guess his worst moments, he'll call himself stupid, or like even hit himself, stuff like that, which is an intrinsic autistic response, but it's because, you know, it comes from a fact of self-blame. But this can extend to like everything else in his life.
We see the phases. We see him go through those cycles, absolutely, of saying that he's ugly and his teeth are busted and all this, to the dating scene sucks. He'll talk about that a lot lately, and that it's just too hard to get a girlfriend. But then he'll loop back to I'm not doing anything to improve my life every now and again, usually when he's super drunk and miserable.
This comes from, like, I mean, everyone kind of has tendencies to do this and not face the ultimate truth, but this is like constant with him. And it comes down to things like, you know, him being kicked out of his old apartment objectively for smoking inside, like paint fuming the place up, stinking it up, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I think on the night it happened is when he felt his lowest and most vulnerable. And I think he did actually admit a lot of things that night.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he had a good sleep, what did he do? He was like, my landlord is a piece of shit. Apparently said, you know, no one would be kicked out from COVID. Well, what the fuck happened? Not my fault at all. And then I got a termed lease.
Yeah, term of lease, not eviction.
Term of lease.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
And he loved that. I think that was a Clint and the apartment management job they put together so that it would just make him feel better. They're trying to soften the blow for whatever reason.
I mean, as an autistic person, I think the only way I benefited through life was maybe because I didn't know, and because those challenges I saw in my life was something that I knew I had to overcome. You know, I went through a lot of unnecessary anxieties throughout my life, definitely, but I guess even small pressure is what actually made me do things. And I think that coddling of him and that suppression of actual like responsibility is what makes Josh happy not having any responsibility.
Oh yeah.
Or kind of just being complacent. Really is because he knows things will be picked up for him. He doesn't have any fear that when his computer breaks that he has to now save up the money for it and he's going to have to stop doing DoorDash. He can still do DoorDash, and I know my dad will buy me a new one.
Oh yeah.
And that's exactly what happened.
Oh yeah.
And there comes from like a level of like, yeah, you have to be sensitive to predispositions to anxiety or anger or like, I mean, even misunderstanding, all that. But that doesn't mean you can't challenge them as well. Me personally, and I think a lot of other autistic people, live their life based on, you know, an intrinsic value system or like a sense of morality that they think they have to uphold. Morality can really be seen through a lens of responsibility if you force it just a little bit. If morality was maybe instilled in him of like, hey Josh, it is probably good for you and everyone around you to shower more often, to change your clothes, brush your teeth. It's not a sense of morality, but it's a sense of responsibility that you can very much communicate in a similar way. It's a value system that he needs to have explained to him and have understood, because right now it's like, you know, the only times he showers is when he wants to prop up a camera to show everyone he does it.
Yeah.
Or the only time he vacuums, Yeah, the only the only time he vacuums is when someone points out he doesn't ever do it. On his cooking videos, he makes sure that everyone sees him cleaning up because he thinks that is an effect of like what people think of him wholly. If he just had those values outside of trying to impress people or prove something, I think that's where true change would come. And that's kind of going along with the alcohol thing because I think even now he's transitioned to is it almost accepting a level of alcoholism, but he's I guess pushing away criticism as a form of like, do you have people call you every time you have one beer? It's like, well, no, because Josh, everyone understands why you're having that one beer
Yeah.
because you're gonna have the second and third, fourth, fifth, sixth,
Yeah.
or it's the eternal justification of like, it's Friday, or
Yeah.
hey guys, Betty White died. I might have a beer.
Yeah. There's always
Um,
some reason to be drinking.
Yeah, and it's one of those things like that Betty White video. Yeah, okay, you might be saying rest in peace, whatever, but I think those little videos and those small time capsules of, I guess, a beer for Betty White is stuff to just communicate to people like, see, I'm only drinking because there's a reason.
Yeah.
You know, it's like he wants to prove something that everyone knows is not true.
Sometimes he'll live stream just when he's eating. There was one where he was just wasted, almost blackout drunk, eating chicken strips, not saying a word. And I guess with justifying
Occasional,
that, yeah,
yeah,
maybe it's just
eyes closed the whole time. Yeah.
so that he can like justify doing DoorDash. It's like, well, this is for a video, so I'm gonna eat these chicken strips on stream and then shut it down.
I'm going to tell you 100% that's what it is.
Yeah.
And I want people to understand that behavior is the autism. I was working at the time. I had a massive drinking problem at the time. What actually changed it for me is I walked out of work, I had a shitty day, and then I connected in my brain, I've had a shitty day, and my brain response was, "Oh, I better go get some drinks on the way home."
Yeah.
As soon as I made that connection, I stopped. But what kind of justified, that social drinking for a long time was, oh no, it's just me, and my housemate hanging out watching The Office,
Yeah.
or watching Netflix, doing whatever, and that's the justification. No one would probably see that as a problem, right? So there's an internal justification with that behavior. I think socially people accept that maybe drinking by yourself is a problem. Obviously, he drinks by himself a lot of the time, but it's justified in a veil of other behavior, like for a video or, DoorDash, all that kind of stuff, or drink combos.
Yeah.
Drink combos is essentially the biggest deception that he puts across. The drink combo that no one ever asked for, but here it is, me mixing, I don't know, what is it, Jack Daniels and Midori and all this
Yeah.
Mountain Dew, whatever, root beer float. It's all a deception because he's alluding to
Yeah.
the food critic or the reviewer, even though he's none of that.
No.
But as long as he persists in that display of his alcoholism, it's justified to him.
He seems to know. It's always on his mind that he's doing something wrong and he has to justify it. So he puts on that big show.
What is your perspective of him drinking vodka from the bottle and holding it in his mouth for a long time?
The act of swallowing it could be really hard on him. It may trigger a reaction that he's trying to delay. Some people will say things like his teeth hurt, so he's just kind of swishing it around and helping it numb things substantially. Other than that, I don't know why anyone would hold vodka in their mouth like that in both their cheeks while they're playing the national anthem for what, like a minute and a half?
Yeah, I think your second point is actually almost on the money, but I'm going to give you a perspective. So obviously comorbidities with autism and ADHD, but we're talking about like immediate gratification or even like it's not a problem if it's not right here. Someone with ADHD might be in their car and say, fuck, my car is really messy, it's disgusting, it's full of garbage. But as soon as they get out, it's not a problem anymore.
For me, if someone's coming over, I make things really clean, but I have a terrible habit of just being a total slob if it's just me because no one's seeing it.
Oh, because you're fine with it, You're
Yeah.
fine with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're almost right on the money with, I guess, the perspective that he holds it in his mouth because his teeth hurt.
Yeah.
He holds it in his mouth until his teeth stop hurting. So it's one of those things of like, oh, cool, my teeth aren't hurting anymore, therefore brushing my teeth is not really my concern right now.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why he can have, massive toothaches, everything. But as soon as it's neutralized, like harsh, high-proof alcohol, like singeing the tips of his nerves in his head.
Yeah.
But yeah, to him, when that pain's gone from the vodka, that means his teeth are fine.
He probably wakes up in the morning with an awful taste in his mouth, and there's two options. You can either brush your teeth or try to eat something, and that might get the taste out. And I'm sure he's doing the latter. I mean, people are confronted with that decision every single day when they wake up, get morning breath.
100%. I think it's almost like a mouthwash for him, or it's one of those things that, it pushes aside the problem of his teeth for a little longer. But it also coincides with what I said about, vodka being inherently masculine or booze being masculine. So I don't want any of that damn mouthwash. Give me some vodka and I'll swish it around till my teeth stop hurting. Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you can see the cycles. You can see the loops in like the behavior and how it just affects everything. So it affects how he presents himself to everyone, how he can, say he's okay with trans people and then says transphobic stuff, all that kind of, I guess, inherent hypocrisy. More often than not, I see, say, like a really terrible stream where he's like dribbling all over himself, even puking on his shirt. And I think what he expects from people is to criticize that. So his first instinct is, rather than someone doing the intervention and saying, hey, Josh, I think you need to sit down, probably, slow down your drinking, maybe focus on your ones a bit more. He does it himself. So his recovery stream is always, I wasn't really happy with how I came across yesterday, so you might not see me that often. I might try drinking less, probably going to start brushing my teeth more.
Yeah.
Working on my wands.
I want to say this is going to be my last video for a while. I'll still be on YouTube commenting and liking videos, but this is going to be my last video for a while. I got alcohol in my fridge. It's just, I don't feel like drinking right now. Take a break from drinking. Give my kidneys a break.
It's almost like the opposite of projection in a weird way. It's like what he expects people will say to him. So he says it to himself or to other people, but he doesn't believe any of it.
Is it just meant to ward off the things he doesn't want to hear, like, hey, you need to stop drinking and brush your teeth? So he says, yeah, I'm going to do these things. And that kind of...
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, but you've seen it numerous times where he says, all right, you might not see me for a bit. And then 2 hours later, I get a notification saying Cobra's live.
Oh, yeah.
This is what I'm saying is an intrinsic autistic perspective is the difference between what Josh believes and what Josh believes people would say or believe about him. Maybe he imagines his dad coming over and saying, all right, Josh, you need to work on your wands, get off Facebook or get off YouTube for a bit. He doesn't believe he needs to do any of that. And every time he says it, I know he's just saying it to appease people. Having watched him for a while, and you're probably similar, is that you don't believe a word he is saying.
No, he can make all kinds of claims and promises, but I really can't think of a time where he has really convinced me through sounding genuine. Maybe sometimes when Clint yells at him, you can see it, and he'll be corrected, kind of like when he did the Carolyn apology. He was very upset.
Facebook, I'm going to be real with you for a second. I fucked up. You know what I'm saying? Like, for real. I fucked up hard. I went too far. And it doesn't matter if anything, the circumstances do not matter. What I did was completely unjustifiable. I said some things that I did not mean to say, and when I deleted it from my Facebook Live, these asshole trolls saved it, and some shit was said, and I didn't want it getting leaked out. You know what I'm saying?
It's really rare for him to really make good on any of these claims. Yeah.
I mean, an ADHD kid does not want to sit down and do homework because they just don't want to do it. And that's something you honestly can't explain, like apart from only certain things give you dopamine releases, and it's specifically from things that you enjoy. Like the base level dopamine is very, very low from my perspective. Unless something inspires me to want to do it, then nothing will make me do it. This is the exact same thing for Josh. He doesn't want to stop drinking. He loves drinking. Why would he stop? It doesn't make sense. Josh probably doesn't like brushing his teeth because it's a chore, or maybe he's using the wrong toothpaste. Maybe if Bond brought out a toothpaste, we'd actually save him.
It's got pheromones in it. It'll be on your breath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That actually might attract something as well. But his belief system at its core, like he doesn't brush his teeth as a belief system. Even wands, I think, shockingly to admit, I don't think he enjoys wands anymore. It's more like a service to fulfill monetary gain to get booze.
Oh yeah, when he's down
That's
on money, only then though.
yeah.
It's not a perpetual thing. Because if he was always making wands, right, and selling them, he'd be in great shape. But it's when he's in dire condition that he starts even talking about collecting sticks.
If we're talking about dopamine releases, like when he has money, when like money hits his PayPal, you see the energy almost hit his eyeballs. Like it's just like this shot straight to the head, and he's like, "Bing, $6, yeah, fuck yeah." That's dopamine release, and that is what inspires him.
Oh yeah. Well, that's most definitely what's up. $28.72 have been sent to my PayPal. Well, I appreciate that. That is pretty freaking sweet. Hell fucking yeah, dude. All the liquor stores are closed. I can always order it tomorrow. That's all right.
I don't want to do wands because why the fuck would I do that? I could be drinking instead. I much prefer to drink. I mean, if I had no consequences to my actions or lack of actions, I probably would be exactly like him as well. What I want to normalize here is the sense that he's been handed a lot of things, but I think anyone would do the same thing he's doing. I feel like any person, if they're given a check that hits their bank account, if they're able to like destroy things or get kicked out of apartments and just have it recovered, most people would be pieces of shit.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but that's the person he is. I love Josh and I want to see him succeed, but with the lack of nurturing and the lack of pressure is what's kind of made him just detestable in a way. But I mean, I still want him to succeed. That's why I kind of said the anti-hero.
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. We want to see a redemption arc where he can kind of improve himself because he is likable in his own weird way. There's some people who just straight up hate him, but I mean, it's how you can laugh at him. He's not just straight up depressing to watch, right? Something about him makes him extremely unique. How do you feel about Clint's parenting? I think I'm getting an idea roughly. Josh growing up, he was diagnosed when he was 15. So it wasn't an especially early age. Clint claims that he went back to college to learn better how to help Josh, but technically it only would have been about 3 years that Clint was actually trying to do anything about this before he just cut him loose. Because as Clint talks about constantly, he's 18. He's a grown man. I can't tell him what to do. But at the same time, he like you were saying, he bails him out. He helps him when he gets evicted. If he's out of money, he'll buy him groceries. He doesn't treat him like a grown man, but he loves to fall back on that. But anyway, I mean, how do you feel about Clint's parenting?
Well, I feel like the reasoning, as you said, to say he's a grown man is an eternal justification for his lack of care in general. And this is coming from, again, like a point of consideration. Like I consider how hard, being a parent probably is, or even the difficulty in having to nurture an autistic child, and maybe you have to work a bit harder to make them understand the world or even take care of them to some extent. But if you really do any research about autism, you understand immediately that it is hereditary. And the chances of either Clint or his biological mother having autism are extremely high. And I would say that, okay, let's talk about this like the dirty room or the dirty car. It's only a problem when you're around him.
Oh, yeah.
And then as soon as you can distance that, it's no longer a problem for him.
Yeah.
So I think in an effect of he was worried about Josh, and the way to remove that worry is to remove him.
He was
I
pretty
think
quick
yeah.
to help him get his own place. That happened almost right away. Josh was in his own apartment. I think that's no coincidence.
Yeah, and I don't think that comes from a point of love and nurturing and independence. It's to get it out of his life, and I say that with consideration of probably that Clint has the possibility of being a lovely person. I don't know him at all, but
Yeah.
we're talking about actions here, and this seems like someone who probably is on the spectrum himself. The art, the photography, the theater, all this kind of stuff.
The bodybuilding, the tight t-shirts.
What is your interpretation of what bodybuilding is to men like that? What are they trying to achieve?
Now with him, I feel like you can be into it and there's different ways to approach it. Clint makes it a point to wear his tight yellow shirt and flex in his photos and somehow incorporate it into his appearance. It is part of his identity. And he could relax a bit on it, the way he dresses.
His perception of what people think of him is probably that he's less of a man. So I think the assertion of bodybuilding is to prove otherwise. It's all a guise, and it's all like making people understand parts of his identity that he can't communicate directly. Everyone does this to a certain extent. It's just like, signaling to the kind of person you are. But I feel like he feels like he has to prove something.
It's really interesting with the sense of morals and rules that Josh has developed, because I started getting really hung up on demand avoidance. Basically, children who you ask them to do something and their stress levels spike. So you have to word it in a very special way that kind of serves them and makes them feel good. But with what you described, if Josh just has these certain things, like it's okay for me to drink or not brush my teeth, so forth, not take a shower, he'll compromise by putting on the air that he's going to do it. But at his root, he has not changed one bit. And I think, of course, that's going to stem into this demand avoidance thing.
The sentiment is exactly the same. It doesn't drive him to change because he just doesn't want to do it. I don't want to clean my fucking room. Oh, but you've got a friend coming over. You've got a girl coming over. Oh, well, I'll clean my room.
Yeah.
And I'm not making parallels between you and what I just said.
No. I mean, you can. That's A-okay.
I mean, I'm sure you do the same thing. You clean up a bit.
Oh, I mean, if someone's riding in my car with me, I clean it up. I'm very comfortable with a certain level of filth and just trash being everywhere, and it's shameful. But I know that the appearance is very important for me if anyone's coming over. And I think if you visit anybody, you kind of see, oh, this person's house is really nice, and their fridge is fully loaded with like drinks and food and snacks. It's no coincidence. I think they do that specifically because people are coming over.
You and Chauncey talked about in a previous one, the hot rod poster or the car poster.
Oh, yeah, the red Studebaker or something all by itself on the wall. He does a pretty good job of expressing his interests. I think because it lines up with the bad boy gothic persona that he wants to maintain.
Yeah, I think the bad boy goth persona is kind of like a middle ground of like his actual expression and the overt masculinity I told you about. Talking about Ozzy here, obviously most people would say Ozzy's his favorite musician, but how many songs does he know past Crazy Train and maybe Changes?
He never talks about it.
Exactly. So it's like, I would love to know Josh's actual interests, if that makes sense, because I mean, Wands is something I see as an authentic part of himself. I can't remember what podcast he was featured on, but it was like those three grown men, and they were asking him what his wand was, and he was openly discussing it. Like, that's a sense of pride, and he's kind of comfortable with it to a certain point.
I think a good tell is that he will behave a little bit more vulnerable when he reveals it. So he'll proudly talk about it with his wands. Sometimes he'll mention that it comes from liking Harry Potter. It's not that often, but he seems to be a little bit shy about talking about Harry Potter. And then with the grown-ass men, he said he was a wand maker, but I think he also had to talk about how he had fans, and he padded it a little bit. He seemed kind of nervous about telling that to them. And I think it's a good sign. If he actually is a little bit nervous about it, but says it anyway, he genuinely likes it versus chugging beer or like really hard alcohol and then almost vomiting. He's putting on a big show.
And sometimes that's the way I like it, nice and stiff. Yeah. I don't know, wet your whiskers.
There's definitely been a lot of videos, like say his cooking videos, talking about what a great chef he is, where I'm like, damn, man, I probably wouldn't have that confidence.
Setting himself up for a situation where he can't fail. Because if it goes bad, you just talked yourself up so much, and you got to eat it.
I think what I said before about the alcohol, like it genuinely is an issue for him now. But I think it might have started as, I do shots or I like beer, that kind of expression of what he thinks he should be when he becomes an adult. But now I think it's a genuine problem he can't admit or escape.
I remember early stories, it was to overcome social anxiety. There was the story of the dance where I think he engaged in some underage drinking and then just danced a whole lot in front of a bunch of girls. I think that was probably empowering because otherwise, without drinking, I'm sure he would never have done that.
I think my first legit experience getting drunk was in junior high, and I snuck some of my parents' Bacardi, mixed it with some Old Orchard juices, like fruit cocktail juices or whatever. And I was a little tipsy when I went to the dance, this community center dance type thing.
I mean, like when I was a kid, and I went to a what do they call it? The community center dances, dude. When I was a kid, and I went to the teen center in Valley City, North Dakota, back in the day when I was in high school and junior high. I had chicks grinding up on me, dude, because I didn't.
Oh,
yeah, dude, good times. You know, and it's like all the other dudes in my class were just going, give me that nasty look. Like, I'm like, brah. And what got me to do that was I went out onto the dance floor and just started doing my thing and fuck what anybody else thinks. That kind of confidence at the time drew in my female classmates from back in the day. Like, look at Saunders go. Oh, yeah. You know what I'm saying? And, yeah, no hand grind. Yeah.
He got started early. He really, maybe because it's just the thing to do is to drink and smoke.
In Wyoming, probably, but I
Yeah.
actually agree with you to a very large extent because when I was drinking at my worst was when I was worse mentally. And absolutely, I would say a large extent of his drinking is to sedate himself from the anxieties he goes through every day. That's like an absolute experience of an autistic person is anxiety perpetually, constantly, every day. You know, you have him on stream wasted, right? That's when it comes out, and that's when you see him hitting the hat on the chair or yelling at the cigarette, which like this is where I want to kind of come with this podcast is like those things are hilarious. Aside from individual acts, I see a very tortured and upset person.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the first times recently where I watched it. I was going, oh, this is absurd. This is crazy. Come on, Josh. Like, come on. You're all right, mate. Sit down, take a breath. But he fed into it because he didn't understand what was happening. He doesn't understand himself or admit it to himself. So he just lets it happen. And this is what I was talking about with like the thin line between tragedy and comedy is like where that was at for me was I could only laugh at it, but because I understood from a personal level, having gone through, I guess, that level of, anxiety or how genuinely horrible it is. I do hope people look at, a scene like that and kind of understand it very similarly because it's the anti-hero thing. Like he doesn't want to help himself, and that's really upsetting to me to watch,
In addition, what I've heard people say is they can't watch certain people on the internet because it's just too depressing. Maybe they're on the verge of being homeless, or they live with their parents and their parents are super old and about to pass. You know, on that night when he's having his giant tantrum, he's gonna fall asleep, wake up the next day, and still have his safety net. Clint's healthy.
Yeah.
He's got a check in the mail. He's just gonna move on to the next, and that keeps a lot of people from, like you said, going into the tragedy realm. That aspect of it.
Yeah, it's like this weird kind of situation that I've never really seen someone experience where they are so close to rock bottom. They have so many fail safes preventing that. That exact stream I was speaking about, the next day, like rather than like talking about his actual issues or how he can help himself, he just says, I really need to work on my anger. Or he makes resolutions with, I need to drink less and do my wands more. But as we spoke about, he doesn't believe any of it. He doesn't have the emotional compass to really understand the breadth of his actual issues. And until he does that, he will just keep calling it anger and just keep saying, I'm working on it.
Part of my New Year's resolution is going to be working on my temper and working on my confidence and not letting simple, stupid shit like that irritate me. Yeah, my New Year's resolutions, working on my temper, working on my confidence, getting my driver's license. Yeah, my New Year's resolution is to win the lottery. Trust and believe. My New Year's resolution is to work on my temper and to be a little bit more confident in myself.
After everything you've described, I think it really helps put a pin in the fact that he is on the spectrum. There were some really,
Mm.
really good points made. A lot of people argue that he just has fetal alcohol syndrome and doesn't actually exhibit a lot of the signs of autism. I would have to agree that he would still be diagnosed today. I wasn't completely sure when I first put down the note whether or not he would still get the diagnosis.
I mean, like, you don't have to do this, but if anybody did half an hour of research, if anybody like read Wikipedia
Yeah.
or read symptoms of autism, Josh fits it to a T. That is coming from my experience. Having lived the life I've led, thinking that I was completely, I guess, normal is what you'd call it. I would say, like, I'm different thinking as opposed to any lesser than anybody. But that's the same for Josh, is like, he just thinks differently, and a lot of his behavior, his thought patterns, his reactions is insular in that it is very similar to an autistic perspective. And when that doesn't make sense to him, it's because of him, which comes with the punching himself or calling himself names, or even, like, I want to say, to an effect, like the inceldom he's kind of dwelling in.
Yeah.
His individual experience of not being able to get a girlfriend explains all women. It explains the dating scene. It explains the gender inequality. Even though anybody watching his videos knows that he's speaking from no perspective or no knowledge on it. It's the world, it's women, it's the dating scene, whatever it wants to be.
Yeah.
He's only seeing the world as it affects him, and affects is a very strong word here. Like the chips incident where the oil was boiling over and he was telling the fire to stop. Very similar autistic trait to personifying dogs. So like
Inanimate
talking to
objects.
dogs yeah, it's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Stupid fucking bottle! Stand the fucking gas!
Sorry about that, folks. I didn't mean to drop the fucking phone. Stupid fucking Pam bottle.
Oh, fuck. I can't walk by something without punching my fist into it! Now that thing's gonna have to be punished. You wanna fucking pinch me? Do you have any fucking idea who the fuck I am? Damn, you stupid cocksucking box. You wanna fucking pinch me?
Assigning those human
know?
qualities to things that don't actually have
Exactly.
them. Yeah. And that's a dangerous path to go down, because that can cause
Yeah.
you so much turmoil.
Mrs. Green feeding his dogs weed. He doesn't realize at an intrinsic level, because of his autism, that animals are completely different. You're tripping over your chair, like the chair's not going to communicate back and say, sorry, bro. Or, sorry, the
Yeah.
fire's not going to stop because you said, calm down.
I was going to say that Cobra doesn't quite seem like he's in his own world, just always wanting to be in that realm that they have. I always thought that Cobra didn't quite have any kind of plane of existence that he exists in specifically. He doesn't, you can't tap into it very easily. I'm trying to word it in a way that makes sense.
I know exactly what you're talking
Okay,
about.
okay.
Because people from a social point look at people who can't speak and they assume that they're living in their head.
Mm-hmm.
When I say their own world, I'm talking about perspective. To say the same as yourself and maybe liking old analog stuff or liking Nintendo stuff. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So sense of morality and ethics, and also what he loves. And that's what I mean with, like, his own world. It's like, if it doesn't fit the mold, then he can't be bothered, because it's not what he wants or what he likes. It's just about externalization, and that only comes from a social perspective. And I think your other guest on the podcast you made regarding autism, I wouldn't say misspoke, but calling it a mental illness I think is a disservice to how closely autism is a part of, like, say, my identity and a lot of other autistic people's identity.
Little professor syndrome. Have you ever heard that before?
Not the phrase, but
Okay.
probably the sentiment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the kindest thing ever. Some people that just, they want to tug on your ear and not let you go. They want to tell you about this thing and never let up.
Info dumping. Yeah, that's what I like
Yeah.
to call it. Little professor kind of sounds a bit not patronizing, but
Yeah.
kind of just like a get the fuck away from me, dude, kind of thing.
With Josh, I was wondering what his equivalent would be, and I think a quick answer is gender relations. Others see it as a means of just chewing up time. He will always just have something to talk about if he covers this stuff, these response videos. Do you think there's any other topic out there that would qualify as him info dumping, or
I think that's definitely an info dump, but it only comes from like a sense of confidence that he thinks that he has with it. I mean, obviously a lot of the points he makes are like incorrect. But I think from a social aspect, he sees people like Terrence Popp or Isaac Butterfield, the absolute cunt, and kind of talks from a perspective that he thinks he understands, or that people will see him as knowledgeable or intelligent. He knows probably a lot about wand making that he hasn't shared because he doesn't think anyone wants to hear about it. But if you sat down and asked Josh how to make a wand, he would talk to you for 2-3 hours about it. And even to some extent, cooking. You know, he could talk your ear off about his wrong perspective on cooking, but it's still info dumping, you know, at some level.
Yeah.
What you need to do is you need to put the Doritos on the thing, the chicken fried steak, and then do this. And it's all wrong, but it's still info dumping. The latest Stephanie video is very special. That video was someone completely derailing his belief system, and that really, really got to him. And the only thing he could do in that moment was just be critical and bite back. I mean, you know, cobras do bite back.
Yeah.
Rather than kind of explaining it from a perspective of any, I guess, reasonable, level-headed person, which is like, oh, that's fine, man, that's just your opinion, and maybe even taking some criticism on board, his only response to someone not understanding or accepting him is borderline violence, but, you know, bit her head off. Completely destroyed her and would rather criticize titty pictures, as he called it, or
boyfriend
her
having a small
boyfriend's
penis
small
or something.
penis.
Her
Yeah.
job, he was really vicious about that, saying she was in a dead end job.
But like, if someone criticized your cooking, would you have that reaction? Because cooking to him is like a belief system. It's something that is as passionate to him as maybe even wands. And that was Stephanie attacking him, so he felt like he would attack her back. But those things are not equivalent at all.
No, it was a very disproportionate response. He talked about how he wasn't angry and not keeping up with her, but he was very obviously upset and mad over
Because he
criticism.
hasn't spoken about Stephanie on his channel for ages.
No. Definitely not.
Jeez.
And y'all can see it for yourself. The only reason people watch Stephanie is because she used to date my ass.
I guess when I say autistic people like live in their own world or from their perspective,
Mhm.
like talking about him breaking up with Stephanie, but you know, the turmoil and how he would take her back in an instant. But it's okay, I've forgiven myself.
Yes.
But if your significant other half is long distance, you two are married, but you're too old, maybe you're not getting enough sex. Okay, some of these circumstances come into play, and it's understandable why some people cheat. There's times I'm still kicking myself for cheating on Stephanie, you know what I'm saying? But when she was in Job Corps, I was missing her real bad. And when I was missing her real bad, I was drinking to help forget about the pain. And there'd be a chick right there wanting to fuck. And I was like, well, shit.
I don't think he sees him and Stephanie breaking up as he caused that. It's just that, you know, it's happened and that she's broken up with me or that we split apart and I wish I could take her back. But he doesn't see the cause of his own actions. It's like, well, what about apologizing to Stephanie about cheating on her? Did you ever do that?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Probably not. No, he's very bad about apologies. There's a really funny thing with Carolyn that I dug up from the Reddit. He apparently lied to Clint about apologizing to her. And Clint then checked with Carolyn and asked if he said he was sorry. She said no. So he turned up at her door wearing his little cape and kind of mumbled something about being sorry and then immediately left.
Cape flowing in the wind.
Yeah, I could imagine. She had to say like, okay, I forgive you from like a window or something because he was already leaving.
She didn't hear it, but he did say it. It's the same thing for him. I do have a point to make about stimulants and neurodivergency.
Mm-hmm.
If the listeners do a little bit of research as well, they'll find a direct connection between stimulant usage and neurodivergency. So tobacco use. I know a lot of people like to kind of discredit tobacco as being a stimulant, but it is accepted as that.
Oh, I mean, the nicotine in it for sure. With him leaning on his autism as a crutch, it's gotten worse with time. He used to say in his old videos that he would never lean back on it as a defense or an excuse But just recently, we saw him at Frosty's say, "Leave me alone, dude. I have autism."
Yeah,
What what's going on with that? Why is it getting worse that he is using that as a defense? Do you think?
it's an immediate silencer for most people. You know, like it's a quick card to play that shuts people down. And I think that interaction in particular showed that one, it was not appropriate because the autism is not why people call and harass him.
It didn't
That's
create
definitely
that
not.
situation. No.
It didn't create that situation. It might have, you know, avoided a bigger conflict, but he kind of used that in effect. And I think the direct quote afterwards was something like, "I have autism, dude. Like, I would have dropped that guy and then I would have got him arrested for assault." It's like, Josh, in that hypothetical scenario in which you beat this guy up, you retaliated and beat him up.
Yeah, you're the
You
aggressor.
would be arrested.
Yeah.
You are the aggressor. Yeah. He's been told that he is exceptional. And I do believe that in normalizing the existence of people like Josh is kind of teaching them that, you know, to live in a society, you need to be responsible and courteous, and you can't just use your autism as an excuse to not adhere to that.
Yeah. He doesn't operate on different rules.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this comes from a sense of complacency or just harmony that everyone needs to live by. And I feel like that scenario that he created in his mind is specifically detailing his perspective on that. He feels like he can get away with it because he's autistic, or, you know, it's an immediate kind of, you know, shutdown in that scenario. But in the courteous way, all he had to say was like, "Hey man, really sorry. Like, I don't have control over them. I understand you shouldn't be dealing with this. I'm just going to finish my beer and go." And that
Yes.
guy would have been like, "Yeah, finish your beer and go." Because he could not face up to sense of responsibility that every human has to live by and play the card instead. Like,
Yeah. Real
it's
fast.
only going to get you pushed out more.
Yeah.
It's going to get you pushed out quicker. Autism should not be used to disarm anyone. It should be used to explain it. That's what Josh seems to not understand, is like, you're not an exception in the case that you should be treated much differently, but the symptoms that, you know, come with your autism or different thinking still can be catered for, but you're not an exception in terms of like what you do and how you conduct yourself from a social level still has results, you know, still has kind of consequences. Even if you were in an altercation and you got punched, that person would be prosecuted for assaulting another human, not assaulting an autistic person.
Yeah. On the flip side, do you think he would have preferred that the guy at Frosty's suddenly treat him like a child and baby him? I think he would have liked
Well,
it.
it depends, because I feel like he would have probably liked it in the moment, but then talked
Yeah.
about how he treated him like a child.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's like it's a very thin line, because in the moment he's getting what he wants, he's being appeased, he's being made the exception.
Yeah.
Afterwards, he would have been like, "Oh, why didn't he just attack me? I definitely would have dropped him."
How do you think he perceives himself?
His image of himself is definitely different to how everyone interprets him.
He is envisioning something that is ideal, or at least not this ugly little boglum. What is the persona you think he tries to exude?
Well, I think definitely what he's aiming for is, I mean, Gothic Bad Boy sums it up pretty well.
Yeah.
But I think that term in itself, like the bad boy, it also justifies him being, you know, almost horrible to be around. So he can be a bad person, he can be angry, he can be an asshole. But no, it's just because I'm a bad boy.
He's a rule breaker.
Yeah, he's a rule breaker. He doesn't go. He goes against the grain. You know, he's not like everyone else. But I think what really comes out, the differences between what he believes and what he actually presents is the internal justification of his appearance. In his mind, he's got, you know, long flowing hair.
Yeah.
So the justification for that is trichoteria, I think it's, and then he's now reached a point where it's undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a constant loop of like, yeah, I'm balding, but who gives a shit? You know, like there are lots of cool people in the world who are bald, and his only examples are completely unobtainable for a person like him, like Vin Diesel and The Rock.
Yeah.
I think it speaks more to the collective autism / narcissism, which I believe is very, very accurate, because like his idea of himself, or idea of what he's putting out in the world, and like how he wants to be perceived, is inherently narcissistic, because a narcissist doesn't inherently have to believe that they are the things that they think. They can also talk about ideas of like how they want to present themselves and how everyone should interpret them, even though it's flawed.
Yeah.
So the long hair is him trying to be Aussie, you know, even though he's nowhere near Aussie. So it's small little traits that at least adhere to his idea of what he is. But he needs to settle for at least actually who he is or work within that mold. When he went completely, you know, chrome dome, he didn't actually look bad.
Not at all.
And he is persistent in that idea of the long hair Aussie lookalike.
Ugh.
I think that really kind of like alludes to this sense of almost false identity that we spoke on.
When that's his identity, he doesn't want to give up his identity, so he just clings on to that as bad as he can. It's kind of like someone obsessed with tanning and they're getting skin cancer and they need to stop tanning. They still want to do it because that's who they are. They're the tan person.
100%. That's a very good comparison.
Oh, thank you. The one thing he's confronted with that flies in the face of all these coping methods is his dry spell. He is on a nonstop dry spell now. I don't think there's going to be any end to it at this rate because he is just continuing to trick himself with these lies and I think becomes less and less desirable. Kind of like his bald head. He has to just admit it. He's not getting with any women whatsoever.
But this also comes from, I think, to a small extent of what he believes a man should do, which is a man should have sex with women. You know, a man needs to have sex. I think there's plenty of people out there who haven't had sex for a long time, but they just don't really give a shit. What's her name? The member of the community. I can't remember her name.
Spooky Girl?
Now. Spooky Girl.
Yeah, that keeps him going. He'll talk about how he can't get with anyone in town, but he brings up his fangirls and seems to feel better.
And whenever I hear people say things like, oh, you'd never have a chance with her, I laugh my goddamn ass off. I'm like, that's the other way around, honey. But sure, you keep thinking that. More like she doesn't have a chance with me because I got fangirls for days, dude. You know how many hot of-age fangirls want to fuck me just because I'm King Cobra JFS? Exactly.
Autism and compassion, or like misinterpretation of emotion or tone.
Mm-hmm.
So this comes from the fact of, just straight up watching him on stream receive call after call from a troll. He calls it very well. Like, I'm very proud of my boy. Like, he's catching it very quick these days. As soon as a woman is on the other line, what does he do?
It disarms him.
It's like, aw,
Yeah.
aw.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the immediate attention. It's the, is there some woman giving me some attention? And then it's usually subterfuged by an inversion of, like, oh, you're the smelliest, blah, 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 blah. And then the reaction of the fake laughter, all that kind of stuff. But that disarms him immediately.
And
it puts his guard down.
When he was at Frosty's, he was doing the big YouTuber intro outside, and some girl laughed at him. And he said, oh, yeah, I made her laugh.
What up, YouTube? It's your sexy god's bad boy, the legendary King Cobra, back at it with another video. That's what's up. Yes. Hey, see, look at that. I'm a womanizer, YouTube. I can make chicks laugh. Yeah.
The reaction video.
Leanne,
God.
He perked up because I made her laugh. And he kind of settled down for a second because he'd been pissy the entire time up till that point.
She's laughing. Yeah, I got her to laugh. She's pissed off, but I got her to laugh.
It's kind of why, like, I believe the sentiment of the community, he'll take Warlord back. Talking like they're in a relationship. Because, yeah, Josh, as I think has been put before, is a sweetheart. I mean, by any regards, like a regular person, I guess a neurotypical person, if we're talking about how the autism affects him, would see someone like Warlord or see even someone like Scotty as a bad influence, objectively.
Yeah. I mean, with Scotty, they made up over, I think he gave him a bunch of Surge, and that settled the Carolyn fight.
Yeah, that'll do it.
And when he reflects back on what was a horrible night with Warlord, that should have been the absolute end of the friendship, he'll just say, oh, yeah, we got way too drunk that night.
That I think you could describe as, yeah, he's a sensitive soul, but yeah, he's also, I don't know, he's lacking a lot of street smarts.
No, the story with Matt Green is ridiculous because he came unannounced. He said he was from Reddit, which really pissed him off. But then he's just like, hey, let's go get some drinks. And he got in his car with him. And it could have been curtains from
Oh my
there.
God.
Yeah, it doesn't take much.
It's not even like autism that does that. It's because like from a social point, he's not experienced enough of the world.
No. Clint talked about Josh having homeless people stay over, right? And I think something you really need to communicate to someone is, listen, if you have homeless people stay over, they may seem really sweet, but they might also just kill you in the dead of the night. That's very dangerous. And here he was talking about how noble he was for it. That may have been all he communicated to Josh, is that, listen, you might get evicted for it, but that was pretty sweet what you did, son. Made no mention of like, hey, you might get murdered by one of these guys. He's going to get taken advantage of. It's honestly a miracle that he hasn't gotten really burnt from those types of interactions, and there's been plenty.
Do you know what echolalia is at all?
I think I've heard it before, but I don't recall what it means at all.
Echolalia is basically impressions or like repeating things. So Cobra thinking he can do really, really good impressions or sing like a Frank Sinatra or whatever is because of echolalia. So he may not be good at it, maybe stretching here, but like the first time he hears the word Valentine's, someone fucked it up. And that's how he's remembered it. Or maybe whenever he hears the word Valentine's, that's what he thinks he's hearing. Because of his dyslexia, he doesn't read the difference, doesn't understand that difference. Him like doing impressions of like Aussie, all this stuff, it's all based on that. And that's also what I think his guitar playing is at a certain extent. He's never playing guitar. He's always mimicking what he thinks good guitar sounds like.
But not ever playing from sheet music or anything. It's just notes and noise.
Because he looks at Randy Rhoads and he's like, oh shit, if I make a growling noise and my guitar makes a similar noise, then I'm as good as Randy Rhoads. Yeah. Echolalia is basically hearing something and then repeating it to yourself. So everyone does this to a certain extent, but autistic people intrinsically can learn that way.
He's good at some of those voices. I got to hand it to him. That SpongeBob was scary.
The SpongeBob is perfect.
Yeah.
It's actually very, very good. But that's probably because he watched SpongeBob a lot as a kid.
Yeah.
And then repeated it back.
Oh, hey, SpongeBob.
What's up, Patrick?
Echolalia can exhibit in a lot of forms, but it also is how autistic people understand the world.
Yeah. Do you think that plays into his ability to recall certain movies?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, because almost the two beats. So that Fox and the Hound, that is echolalia to a T. We're talking about pacing, phrasing, the accents, everything. That is because he literally memorizes it as a reel in his brain, fully learning and adapting it by repetition.
Gosh.
Hearing something and repeating it. I feel like a lot of people do not know about that concept. So
No, and it makes total sense with him. It's amazing.
But there's also a trend. It's more common with neurodivergent people, but it's called alexithymia.
Oh.
So alexithymia is essentially the inability to process an interpersonal experience, the emotions associated with it. But it's more akin to, say, being depressed and you don't know why. A disconnect between, oh, I think I feel fine, but I feel really sad. Nothing's happened. Why do I feel that? It's because the nuance of like expression in an autistic person's brain is so conflicting. Never being able to pinpoint one emotion. And like, I think people see emotions as a grade anyway, or like a nuance. A gradient. The autistic experience is specifically going, I feel happy right now, but I also feel exceptionally sad, but I don't know what the name of this emotion is because it feels like nothing I've ever felt before. The result of alexithymia, if you don't understand what it is and you can't work out those nuances and recognize what you're doing, often the expression of that is resentment or anger.
Something that may be eligible. He does the Sprite Tropical remix and hates it. And he then proceeds to destroy his guitar. Those are very strange events to happen next to each other.
That specific scene of him like hitting his hat and yelling at his cigarette was very much that, now that I'm thinking about it.
I was just thinking about that, in a theory, that was around the time that his websites were getting taken down, like his merch websites. And he played it off like it was no big deal, but then he threw a colossal tantrum that night.
Because he doesn't understand the persecution that he's receiving.
Yeah.
It's very simple. It's because you put up copyrighted images. the way he interprets that is the world's against me. Fuck this shit. I feel depressed, but I also feel angry, but I also feel sad. I don't know how to identify this or express this. So I'm just going to melt down. That was hilarious, but in every other section of him like screaming and stuff, I was like, this guy is in so much pain.
It sounded feral sometimes.
Yeah, he's in a lot of pain. He's terrified. He's so anxious. He's upset. I just want to give him a hug.
Yeah.
Then it's also like this sense that you have to like, I guess, console within yourself, which is like, well, if he doesn't want to take the time to identify this as a problem, then I don't know if I want to be upset by it. So I'm just going to laugh. Yeah. And I think a lot of people would agree the same, is that the humor or the laughter comes from the fact that he is so unchanged despite his object issues.
So stubborn. He's just like mud. He cannot be shaped or formed into anything. He's just going to continue being what he is.
It's a shame, because I think even if someone who was very like Josh or even had autism or anything tried to communicate all this to him in a nice way, talking about their experiences, I feel like he'd say, "You don't fucking know me, dude."
Yeah.
And just fuck them off. And that's why I think he's a bad person. The autism is not what makes him a bad person at all.
Yeah.
It's the choices he has made along the way that shape the person he's become and the personality he likes to exhibit to people. I think it's a shame, and like I think identifying that is what, makes it fine for me to laugh at him or enjoy company sometimes, because admittedly there's been times where I've felt bad. I'm sure everyone's felt shitty and being like, oh, neat, Cobra's got a new video. Even when he takes a 4 or 5 day break and then comes back, I'm like, oh, pizza time, here we go.
Yeah.
No, but you never want to see him fail, but the only response to failure in the face of something tragic that you can't change yourself is just to laugh and be like, okay, well, guess this is where we're at.
He has a horrible attitude. He has the worst attitude, I gotta say.
Yeah.
There's different approaches he could take to all these different things, and like you said about being unknowable when people try to approach him or help him, and being really stubborn. I think that's a conscious decision he makes that affects him greatly, negatively.
From my experience, like the way stubbornness exhibits in autism particularly is when someone is masking and not accepting their true self, which, yeah, he's been told he has autism, but he does not understand himself at all.
No.
Not in the slightest.
No. Yeah. It's a lot of ideas and concepts that he wants to embrace and kind of put onto himself, but that's about it.
You should not be able to label someone with things they like. You should be able to label someone with intuitive concepts. So you say, oh yeah, Josh, he's really curious. He's quite creative.
Yeah. Human qualities.
Would not say, oh yeah, he's a wand maker.
He's
he's
a wizard.
He's an Aussie fan.
Yeah.
He's a wizard. He's given himself the label, which is goth bad boy. And it's like, man, that's not who you are.
No.
No. You're so much more than that.
Yeah, it's always these big statements. When I win the lottery, I'll have my hair plugs, and that's how he talks about his hair now. Eventually, it's going to be dental implants when he wins the lottery, because he's going to lose those teeth.
Even teenagers say that, like, oh, when I'm 18, then all my problems will be better. When I'm an adult, then everything will be fixed. It's like, he's looking at the end goal of something that's completely aspirational, and it is a dream. Like your clock tower mansion would be excellent, but it's not going to happen the way you're going.
No. With Josh and his anxiety, it feels bad, but he's still in a very good era right now in his life. His parents are healthy. His health is still keeping it together. But even now, I feel like he puts all of his worries and anxiety into like a closet or something. And he just shuts the door. And every now and again, he peeks inside and looks in there and gets really freaked out. But he is shelving all of his worries and problems just perpetually. It's getting worse, though, and it's going to continue to get worse.
That's an effect of why I think he repeats himself with the gender relation stuff so much, because rather than focusing on his own issues, he feels like if he fixes the tragedy in the world, then that'll subside the problems that he feels.
I would give up a lifetime of sex to end sexual abuse and rape.
him obsessing over like 9/11, all this kind of stuff, and crying about it is in a way the only way he can externalize the actual emotion he needs to feel. All the guy needs is to literally sit down, talk about his emotions, and have a good cry.
Yeah.
Just the same way he can't just admit he's an alcoholic, so he filters that through like it's Friday. It's all diversion.
It's gonna reach a critical mass, though. I feel like, because he's got some pressures that will get worse as he gets older. He can't live like a baby forever. It would be really interesting to see it all come out in some stream where he just kind of really acts truthfully or honestly and has a good cry and talks like a real ass human being.